We are live.
Yeah, we are. Okay. I think I might be on going live on Instagram. We'll see. Hey, yep, there we are. Hi, how are you, Marnie?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a beautiful sunny day in Brooklyn.
Oh,
How
that's
are you?
great. We're good. We got a little bit of rain yesterday, which we always need in California. So I can't complain, even though I do. I got soaked because I went out when it was like the worst time to go out. But
Yeah, yes, I know that California desperately needs it. I'm adjusting back to, I was upstate
yeah,
caregiving with my grandmother, and it was, I left a bunch of snow on Monday, and then got to Brooklyn and it was in the 60s. And so
nice.
pretty crazy. We're in spring here.
I know. That's so great. Yeah, no, we're a little spring-like, but yeah. So how are things then up there caregiving?
Touch and go, but good.
Mhm.
I left and my father took my place, and so there's always someone from the family sort of nearby, but it's definitely up and down. I mean, caregiving, it can be wonderful and it can be really challenging depending on the day, the mood, how everyone's feeling.
It is. It's hard and it's no, we are creatures of habit and we like things to we're always trying to get to what's called homeostasis, like everything's good and predictable. And caregiving's not predictable because like literally on one day somebody can be like really alert and lucid and talking and then the next day something changes pretty drastically. So it can feel like whiplash. And that's
Totally.
and I think that is part of the unsettling issue about really the end of life is that it isn't at all predictable and it's very hard because we want to prepare ourselves. But that's why we need to have all these
That's
difficult conversations.
it's exactly what was going on. There was a day where she basically gave her deathbed goodbyes to my whole family that I wrote down, and then the next day we're kind of coloring at the kitchen table, and you're just like, "What's happening? What's happening here? I
She's
can't
rallying. It's
prepare."
great. She's going to get all better. It's going to be great. Just take 10 years off her life. She'll be back to being 90. It'll be great.
Ugh, but what's actually one beautiful thing that was going on up there, sort of in the background, is that one of her caregivers was helping her write letters to her children, my dad and my uncle, and to all the grandchildren.
Oh,
Um, and sort of she was saying what she wanted written down, and the caregiver was doing it, and that those letters will go out to us at a certain point. And I just thought that that was I was so grateful and thankful. I do this with clients all the time, but it's so nice that I will get to receive. I'll just get to be the granddaughter, and
so
um,
nice.
and I'm really excited
That's really
and
nice.
touched by that.
That's really nice. I that's really super sweet. And I know at some point we want to talk about some of these social emotional things, but I'll tell you another thing
Yeah,
that's really on my mind right now is stuff, like all
yes,
of the stuff, right? Like my husband and I are kind of going through this time period where we're thinking about, we're getting ready to take a trip. So, and we do have a house sitter, so everything will be secure and the cat will be taken care of. But it's also just organizing our stuff to leave. But we're looking around, we're like, we just have too much and we don't need it. And being aware of how much I had to take care of, I still have stuff from my parents. And then it's tax season. So we're putting all of those things together. And again, stuff, it's like
stuff.
paper, digital. And so this is a thing that a lot of families go through is people in their life, they accumulate things and one year this might be really important to us and then, we grow up and it's not anymore. And what do we do with it? And it's so hard for people to give things away. It's hard to donate things. But you know what? I made a trip to, a donation site this weekend and dropped off a carload of things. And I felt such release in doing that. But it's hard. It's not easy.
It
What
is
do
hard.
you find? What do you find?
No, it's I find the exact same thing. One of the things that I've done the last few years is the week between Christmas and New Year's, I go through every drawer, every closet, the pantry to see what's expired, and I do one room a day.
Yeah.
Um, and like you're saying, I mean, I live in Brooklyn, so I'm hauling my stuff by hand, but I'm taking trips to the local donation center, and it does feel good. It starts the new year fresh for me, where I get to start knowing that the space around me is organized and that I am letting go of things that no longer. But it is a real thing, like you're saying that there's so much weight put on things, especially things that belong to people that we love, and how do we separate out things
Yeah.
that are, we're okay to keep and that it's okay to let go of. I
Mm.
remember when I was in my early 20s, a good friend, his mother died and his father had already passed. He was left with a large house of stuff. His mother was a hoarder of fine goods. It was not garbage, but there was just every closet, everything was full. And he was left to have to deal with all of it, to clear
Yeah.
out an entire house. And so there was a bunch of us who would come and, help clean and organize and take things and donate and to try to sell. And it was an extra trauma. He had
Yeah. Mm.
lost his parent and then was left with all of these things that she hadn't dealt with herself.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing that a lot of people, their basement is full of their parents' furniture
Yeah.
or clothing, or and how do you deal with the emotional aspect of things?
Right, right. Yeah, it's really hard, and I know having gone through with, some of my parents' stuff, that was a decision my husband and I made. We're like, we just said to our children, who are adults now, but, and one is very much a minimalist and the other is a little bit more sentimental about stuff, but by no means a hoarder. But it's this thing of we said to them, nothing we have in this house is really that precious. The stuff that's really important, you kind of know what those are. I have some heirloom jewelry from my mother that I've already talked to my daughter about, but I also said, and I really don't care. I won't know. I don't care. Do what you need to do,
Yeah.
Like don't maybe the ring isn't the first thing you pawn to get some money. But hey, if you're really in a pickle, I'd rather you survive, So in the event you need that. But yeah, the stuff is like just, you know, and then I know up in our attic, we have all the things that our kids made when they were little kids, and I haven't had the heart to throw them away, but I'm like, "Really? How many of these things do we need to keep?" It's a hard thing. It's a hard
I
thing, and I do feel like there's a cultural, maybe generational, maybe it's not cultural. There are probably cultural issues too, right? But there are definitely some generational things. My mother was of the generation that collected things,
Sure.
and I never was a collector of things. I think I did as a little kid, maybe a Girl Scout project or something, but they weren't precious things. And we're much more mobile these days, right? After a certain point, even baby boomers became more mobile. So we didn't want to carry our stuff with us everywhere we went. But I mean, there's a lot of people who spend lots of money every year with stuff in storage that they never look at. For how
Well, there
long do
was
you do that?
It's totally true, and there was actually a really interesting New York Times article recently about, China. Everyone used to have large china sets, and there was a family, and it was passed down, I think, from, like, 5 generations, and it's to the next generation where, like, it's just 2 sons, and they're like, "We don't want this," and, clearly there's family history. This has
Yeah.
come, through different countries, and there's a weight to it, but also there is not a desire by the next generation, and how can we also just be okay with it? I think that, you know, for me as I age, like, it's the experiences with my family and my friends that mean the most to me, that carry the most memory. It's really no longer getting that gift or that thing that's kept in my house. Of course, I love things,
Yeah, yeah.
but I've really started to try to minimalize, knowing that first of all, having less can feel better in one's apartment. Um, but I really do think that we are the ones that put a weight on it. One of the things that I've found, in my own family, when you're talking about jewelry and heirloom, those things can really be amazing to pass
Mhm.
down. And they're also a little more mobile, and, they can share memories. For my grandmother, she sat down the grandkids at the table. We picked numbers, and it went around in a circle where we got to pick something that we wanted. It wasn't just
Wow.
thrust on us that we wanted. She was sitting with us, and
Wow.
she shared the story behind that piece.
Nice.
And so it was this meaningful thing where we all got to hear the stories. We all got to choose things that had meaning for us, but we
Yeah.
weren't left with things that maybe we would feel that we needed to keep, or that maybe we wouldn't wear, or whatever the thing was. But by doing it as a family, it became something meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And oh gosh, there's so much you can do with that. You could videotape that session, or you could write something down, but I love the storytelling. That's where the emotional piece comes in, and it's so beautiful, and that you each had a choice, and you got to
Yeah.
hear about the piece that you wanted. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, and I think it's just important too. I think it's made me more aware of being a conscious consumer rather than a um, you know, buying more of something than I need, right? Like I don't need to buy the t-shirt in every color it's offered, right?
Right.
It's fast fashion that's just going to end up in the landfill. So what do I really need? How can I trying to think like how can I live? I don't know.
Have
Like,
you
can I
read the
can I live like somebody I wanna hear about this book because 'cause we've talked about it, but I wanna live
Yeah.
like somebody who could actually travel for 2 weeks with a carry-on. I don't know if I'll ever get there because I'm packing for a trip next week, but that's a goal of mine, right?
I only have a carry-on suitcase.
Awesome. Well, tell me about this book because you have talked to me about this book.
Yeah, the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning is really this concept of, while you're living, not um, taking care of your own items, to
Yeah,
really be thinking about things intentionally. What do I love that I want to look at every day, and it's part of my life? What can I start to donate or give away,
yeah,
or, like what my grandmother did, give on to the next generation in a thoughtful way, where you're not giving everything, you're just giving something small.
yeah,
um, and with the intention of not leaving a mess behind.
yeah.
They also made it into a TV show on Peacock. There's like one season, it's executive produced by Amy Poehler, and
Oh,
so
God.
it's funny, it's meaningful. I made both my parents watch it, and I was like, "Oh, look at this show. Let's watch this." Um, to get
We're not
them thinking
Swedish. Why
about
are we
it.
watching this? But no, I love this.
But, it led to a conversation with, my father. My father is a painter. He was a dentist, he's a painter. A lot of dentists, fine motor skills.
Yeah.
They do a lot of art. And he has hundreds of paintings in the basement, hundreds, of very colorful geometric art. And my sister and I are always thinking, Dad, what are we going to do with all of this? This is
Yeah.
not necessarily my style. I have some in my apartment and I love them. And what are we going to do with hundreds of them? And so, we've talked as a family, and at his funeral, everyone's going to walk away with a painting.
There you go. Party favors, it'll be great.
How can we
Big
make
ones,
this
big
fun?
ones, but yeah. I love that idea though. That's really nice. And I think that I'm gonna have to watch that show because that'll be fun. But just it's starting that conversation of like what how much meaning do things have,
Yeah.
and then what kind of not putting too much pressure on anyone to take something that they don't want. And
Yes.
that's not a rejection of the person who's offering it, but it can sure feel that way. So how do you navigate that conversation, right? That's I think what is at the core of some of this sometimes is one person has a value of these things represent me, So
Yeah.
I want to give them to you for you to remember me, and the special times we had when we used this china or this stuff. And the other person's like, but either I already have some of my own special stuff, or I don't I don't entertain like that, or I live in a small apartment, I can't have, so whatever it might be. But there can be a disconnect between what one person's set of values are and the other ones. And so how do you navigate those conversations? And I think it's about being as sensitive and understanding of the each other. And sometimes it's just a matter of, I really think it's excuse me, I think it's important not to make promises you can't keep, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
someone says, uh, promise me you'll do X, Y, and Z. Can you make that promise? Be thinking about whether you can make that promise and keep that promise. But maybe it's okay to say, I'm going to do the best I can. And that's non-committal, but it might be where you are. And then the other part of it is, if you're the other person and you have the stuff, is thinking about, are you asking people to make a promise that they can't keep? And so that's, for me, that was the lesson I got after managing all my parents' stuff. And believe me, they did not lay a lot of, there was just stuff because they hadn't, minimized a little bit. But there was just I think there was one thing my mother said, please just don't let the love seat, just don't let that go. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? It's in my garage. So maybe someday someone will have it, but I don't have space for it. It's in my garage. It's where we sit and put our shoes on before we go out for a walk. I mean, it's being
I
used,
mean,
but
maybe it can be reupholstered at some point and brought new life into making someone happy. But it's true that, we're always given, I don't know, I've received gifts for holidays or birthdays that, the 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 thoughtfulness is there, but maybe it's not my style, or maybe I already have something like it, or for
yeah,
whatever reason it doesn't connect with me, and you feel a guilt, you feel an obligation to hold
yeah,
on to it for X amount of years.
yeah,
And when do you let yourself off the hook for holding on to something
right,
that you don't need or want, or for whatever reason, or you're
right,
just downsizing? and
right,
and I think that a lot of people hold on to gifts or belongings of loved ones because there is a connection there. It holds weight because you love that person. You love what it
yeah,
meant for them, when you were, yeah, experiencing it together. And maybe
mhm,
it's hard to let go of that piece of furniture, not because you love the furniture, but because you miss that person,
right, for sure,
and
for
that part of your time together. Um, and so it's really also just sort of pulling apart the threads of why can't I let go of this?
right, right.
Like, what is holding this for me, and how can I maybe write down the meaning for it, or work through those feelings that are keeping you tied to things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, so those are just really important things. I did want to ask you, because I am not an expert in this particular thing, well, in many particular things, but digital stuff. So the digital afterlife that's left behind, how do you help clients or families dig through all of that, and how to find what might be out there? Because gosh, most of us are pretty, tied in deep to the digital footprint. So, do you have
Oof,
thoughts?
it's a real good one. I suggest to everyone, to have a digital password manager. So, your passwords are protected in a secure way, but also, most of the digital password managers, you're able to name, emergency contact, so that if something were to happen, they would have access to it.
Nice.
To have a digital vault, stuff, just like we're saying, I'm thinking about the wildfires in California. There are times when we lose, or there was a fire in my apartment building in 2019,
Mm,
and many of the apartments were flooded with water from the firefighters, and
mm,
things were lost, and papers, important paperwork. So how are you making sure that you are protecting your important paperwork in a way that can be transferred or, mobile with you. So a
Yeah.
digital vault, I think, is really important. There are great ones out there.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's this idea of how can you declutter as you go, whether it's, taking that 5 minutes in the morning and unsubscribing from all of that spam email that you're getting and those newsletters that you're not reading so that you can make sure that those important things are
Right.
being taken care of.
Right.
It's managing your subscriptions and having, either a spreadsheet of your subscriptions or some way of knowing what do you have? It's really taking an inventory of, okay, where are my online digital assets living?
Right.
Whether it's your bank accounts, your investment accounts, um, your travel points, your
Oh, yeah.
loyalty points,
All
all
of
of these
that. Yeah.
things. And as you're looking through it, you might actually save some money because maybe you have 5 digital subscriptions to streaming services and you're only watching 3 of them. But that 6.99 is going out the window every month
I
that
know.
you're not paying attention to. So it's also a way to be like, all right, maybe I'm going to save a little money now by being paying attention to that stuff that's
Right.
living
Right.
online. It's a real issue. I think I was giving a course on digital legacy and I asked people, how many photos do they have in their digital, mine has currently over 38,000. I am not proud of
Wow.
this.
Wow.
There are
And is that on
I
your
have a dog. I
phone
have a
or
lot of
you downloaded
photos.
them? Huh?
um Yeah, there's a lot of pictures of Penny on there. But but the point is that there are apps that help you clean these up. There's one called Cleanup,
Oh,
where you can go on and it'll say you have 80 screenshots of X. Do you need all of them? And you can say no, and it will delete them in bulk. Or if you have 100 photos that look very similar. You can pick out the one that you like and it will delete the rest.
yeah.
And there's a way in which you can sort of slowly start to organize these things so that you can make them into something that you're actually going to look at, whether it's a photo book or a recipe album or,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever it is that actually becomes sort of a legacy project versus something that kind of just lives in the oblivion that you're never actually looking at.
The oblivion of my hard drive, right? There is so much there. Oh my God. Or my cloud. Oh my God, my cloud. My cloud is really, it's pretty full. I am like that. I mean, I think I once was looking for a photo and I use a Mac. And so I have the photo app that is on there. And oh, I must have downloaded when my kids were playing soccer, right? I'm not a great photographer, but I had this camera that I could put on sports mode and it was taking, 500 shots in a second kind of thing, and all of those are on this. So it looks like in this one year, I think I took 5,000 photos or something. It's
Totally.
not quite that much, but it feels like that. And I mean, there's no difference between most of the pictures. And I'm like, I don't know I don't want to go through all of these and find out where somebody has their eyes closed and their eyes open or whatever. I just want to dump them, but I haven't gotten to that yet. So we'll see.
Well, it's the idea of progress over perfection,
Yeah.
whether you're taking 30 minutes a week to organize your physical space or your digital life. It's a gift for you now because it frees up space.
Yeah.
Or it's a gift to the people down the line who are going to have to figure out
Yeah.
what everything is, what's important, what's not important,
Right.
and have to like
Mhm.
parse that out.
Really, really important. So it isn't just for us right now. It's also for who's going to come behind us to either just clean up or it's someone who we care about who is going to miss us and wants to hang on to certain things, but what do we don't want to leave too much problem for them because it's too heavy. And I mean, and it's not my right to say, oh, this is too heavy for you, but having been through it,
Yeah.
I guess my advice would be, if you've been through it where you inherited all of your parents' stuff or you helped someone else clean up a lot of stuff, then when we talk about conversations we need to have, that's a great conversation to have as a person, middle age with your adult children. what do you want me like, what don't you want me to leave in your lap? Just have those conversations now. And that can guide you too about what you might throw away now and what you might stop acquiring now. So yeah,
I,
it's full circle. It's not just end of life. It's like even right now.
Oh, completely. And I think that having that conversation as a family, um, and understanding like why certain things feel very important, or the meaning behind it, can be very helpful.
Yeah.
But also, if it is so overwhelming, which sometimes it is, if you've been in a house for 40 years and you've collected a lot of things, it can feel, where do you even start? And there are professional organizers, there's senior move managers. If you're looking to downside, you don't even have to be leaving your home. You can just be using these services
Yeah.
for someone who can come and sort of help take the emotion out of it, to be listening, to be compassionate, but also to help you make maybe some hard choices about what is it okay for us to let go of
Right.
and be
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so there's so much, and this has been so good. This is our third conversation, and it's nice that
Yeah,
we always still have so much that we can talk about. And I
I
have to
know.
say, and both of it, you're caring for your grandmother, and I have, my parents are gone, but my in-laws are alive and hanging in there. And so these are still important conversations, and most of my friends are going through this.
Oh yeah.
I'm in my early 60s, and so most of my friends, between 55 and 70, we're all in this right now. And it's kind of looking at how are these things, what's coming up, what's bubbling to the surface, and what do we need to talk about. And then the last point I guess I'd make is, because I do work with a lot of people who are caring for someone with dementia, this is another one that's really difficult. It's these are conversations that sometimes you can't have after a certain point. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm always stressing earlier rather than later. There's just it's too difficult to engage in that kind of reasoning and emotional stuff with someone who might not be able to follow the conversation the same way they used to. And then you're left with, you feel like you're in limbo for a while, and that's a heavy feeling. So it's important to talk about it ahead of time.
And I think that the earlier we're talking about it, the less weighty it feels.
Yeah.
It's by spreading out these conversations, because there are a lot of them, just like what we're saying, there's endless conversations to be had. So
Yeah.
how can we just start casually having them
Right.
as part of an ongoing relationship, so that it's not all at once we have to figure out all of the things.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's fun. It's good. It's good that we're doing this, and I'm excited about that show. I'll have to take a
Yes.
look at that. A couple things that we mentioned today that I would suggest people maybe Google for. One was, you called it so the Swedish art of death cleaning.
The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. It's a mouthful.
Yeah,
It's a book and it's a show.
yeah.
Um,
That's great. So I think if we
yeah,
get Swedish death and cleaning in there, we might find it.
you'll find it. You'll find it.
And then you mentioned another one, and you were saying Digital Vault. Is that what someone would Google? Digital Vault, or go
Yes.
to a browser and find Digital Vault, and you'll find different products that could help you with that.
Yes. And digital password manager, if you
Excellent.
don't have one already set
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah.
Those are
Because
some good ones.
because the Post-it notes are not really a great option for those, because Lord only knows.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I know that next week, we're gonna try to dive into more of the emotions and the conversations that we need, that come up when we're about to have these conversations. And I
Yeah,
know that this is something that you work a lot with
yeah.
clients around, is how to
Yeah, no, I
approach
would love
them.
to. Yeah, it's important to kind of talk about the nitty-gritty and the legal and the, hard and fast kinds of things. And then I like to just always help people think about the social emotional piece. Like, how is this impacting another person? How do you talk to kids about certain things? How do you talk to, you're not going to talk to your 12-year-old the same way you're going to talk to your 24-year-old. And what are some guidelines around that? So I think it's important to just be cognizant of that, because when you're stressed out, you might not stop to think, how do I do this? You just kind of shoot from the hip. And look, that's how life is sometimes. So forgive
Totally.
yourself if that happens. And then also think, well, how can I be more conscious about this going forward?
Yeah, having those tools on how to
Yeah.
at least start to think about these conversations, I think is going to be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, it's good to see you. I hope you have a great week
Yeah.
and that
I'll
your
talk to
rhetoric
you
holds
next
up.
week.
Yeah. Next week. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.